We are about to be governed by the Columbia University student body. He embodies the undergraduate mindset. It's entitled, ignorant, performative, and parasitic. It engages in the pseudo play acting of revolutionary fervor that is totally dependent on a larger infrastructure of public order and capitalism. Is like putting somebody who can't read a music score in front of an orchestra and expecting him to conduct Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. He does not have anything to make us believe in his background that he can pull this off.
Hello, welcome back to the Brendan O'Neill Show with me, Brendan O'Neill, and my special guest this week, Heather McDonald. Heather, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you, Brendan.
It's so good to have you back on. Every now and then we need an injection of wisdom from our cousins in America so we can find out just exactly what's going on over there and, of course, how it will impact on the Western world more broadly. You're always a great person to turn to for precisely that. I've got to kick off with Zohran Mamdani. You know, it's the elephant in the room. We can't avoid talking about this takeover of New York City, this extraordinary electoral event where a self-professed democratic socialist, the first Muslim mayor, the first mayoral candidate to get over 1 million votes since 1969, I think, made waves around the world. We talked about nothing else in Britain for a couple of days after he was elected, and I'm sure it was even worse in America. Huge event, definitely is going to change New York, you would argue, for the worse, and it could even have an impact on politics across the Anglo-American world. So to kick it off, just tell us, have things settled down? Are people still in shock? Are people still surprised? Is the left still celebrating? What's the vibe now, a week after his victory?
I think it's definitely shock, Brendan. We're waiting. He's starting to appoint people to his administration. Most worrisomely, his chief of staff is going to be a young woman who is with the Democratic Socialists of America. She was the guiding light behind one of his most idiotic policies, which is, in fact, to defund the police. The press has been letting him get away with the lie that, oh, I've backed away from my defund the police rhetoric. No, he hasn't. He's going to move $600 million from traditional policing functions within the New York Police Department into this new Department of Community Safety that, again, this Democratic Socialist it's her brainchild, that is composed of feckless social workers who are going to go and respond to the psychotic vagrants that are pushing people into subways and clubbing them from behind. So we're losing funding for traditional policing and going into something that is proven not to work. So she's worrisome. He's bringing in somebody from Mayor Bill de Blasio's mayoralty, who was the first deputy mayor under de Blasio. And classically, Mamdani, with his very transparent display of his perverse urban priorities, has said that the mayor in his own lifetime that he finds most successful is Bill de Blasio. De Blasio, who began the unwinding of the unforeseen, just victorious triumph over public disorder and squalor that began under Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, of sadly recently besmirched reputation. But I can tell you, Brendan, in the 1990s, he was the most profound, inspired, brilliant urban reformer that has ever been seen, and then followed up with Mike Bloomberg, who was less flamboyant in personality, but kept up with the understanding that the purpose of urban government is one thing and one thing only. It is to create the conditions that will allow private enterprise and effort to flourish. It is about maintaining public order, public transportation that functions. Nobody should feel that going to a subway puts him at risk of being clubbed by a drug-addicted, mentally ill vagrant. But that is now the thing that we simply accept as a matter of course. So Giuliani, Bloomberg did an enormous unforeseen triumph in New York City. De Blasio was the source of its unwinding. So that's the other guy that he's put in. So there's no sign anybody that is innately optimistic, which I am not, but is going to strive to find things. Well, he's going to be a moderate or pragmatist. No, he's not. This chief of staff, this young DSA woman, she came out with a classic statement. She says, "It fills her with rage and despair. I'm deeply ashamed to live in a place where we allow people to sleep on the concrete at night." Well, I say, good for you, I agree. Who allows them to sleep on the concrete at night? The left. It's the left that says, "Oh, no, you may not compel them, even though they're completely unable to take care of themselves. They cannot enjoy the fake panoply of rights that these advocacy groups have won through courts and bestowed on them. They're clearly incompetent to enjoy those rights, but you may not pick them up by compulsion." So she's pretending this compassionate virtue when her entire political philosophy and political allies are the ones responsible for keeping these pathetic scarecrows on the streets.
Anyone who uses social media in the UK will have had this hugely irritating experience. You go on social media, look at what's trending, only to find that vast amounts of what people are posting is being blocked for British users. Under the Online Safety Act, we're now expected to prove we're over 18 just to read the news or scroll through X. And even if you're outside the UK, these restrictions on online content will be coming to your country too. Thankfully, there is a simple way around this, and it's with the help of our partners at Private Internet Access, or PIA for short. PIA is the VPN I use and trust. In case you don't know, a VPN, or virtual private network, is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. Whenever you're browsing online on an unprotected device, your device is transmitting a lot of information out into the open, which can be seen by multiple parties before it reaches the website you're trying to visit. Instead of giving away your personal information and location to the world, PIA lets you change your IP address to one of 91 countries. This means you can gain access to websites and services that are only available in those locations. And it's not just that. Did you know that streaming services like Netflix and Prime Video have huge catalogues of content, but you can only access a fraction of it from your own country? Using PIA to change your location opens up a whole new world of streaming. I love it. Paying for Netflix without using PIA is a bit like paying for front row seats at the cinema but being forced to sit in the hallway. I also use it all the time when I'm traveling to catch up with what's going on at home. Because PIA is available for all platforms, I never need to worry about my safety or my privacy. It works on Windows, Apple Macs, iPhones, Androids, and more. Even better, you only need one subscription to protect yourself across all the devices you own. So, sign up now to the world's most transparent VPN provider and take advantage of our special offer. Viewers of my show can get 86% off a subscription to Private Internet Access. So that's just £1.67 a month. And you also get an extra 4 months thrown in completely for free. To take advantage of this incredible deal, just go to piavpn.com/Brendan. That's piavpn.com/Brendan. Signing up is totally risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 customer support. You won't regret it. Sign up now at piavpn.com/Brendan. A very sobering picture that you paint there, and one that I think a lot of listeners will recognize in terms of how you're describing what might now come in New York City following Mamdani's victory. I wanted to ask you a bit more broadly what you think he represents, because we see so much. I've seen so much discussion, and I've tried to follow as much of it as I can. We've got people saying that he's a kind of secret jihadist. We've got others saying that he's a communist and New York is going to become like Beijing or something. We've got others who, including on the right, who say that actually he's responding to some serious economic problems amongst millennials, people who have got good degrees, went to university, are now saddled with student debt and can't buy an apartment. So there's such a different reading of what he represents, but I want to get into some of those readings in a bit. But one thing that I really appreciated about your excellent piece in The Spectator is that you kick off by saying that he, in some ways, he represents the coming to power of that kind of campus craziness that we've seen over the past few years, this kind of Ivy League lunacy that people will be familiar with in terms of, globalize the intifada, cancel culture, that kind of preening, pseudo virtuous posturing that became very common in the richer universities. Speak to us a little bit about his background and why you think he kind of represents that class of people in terms of what he intends to do.
Well, first of all, he does. We are about to be governed by the Columbia University student body, a group of people. He embodies the undergraduate mindset. It's entitled, ignorant, performative, and parasitic. It is completely ignorant about the civilization that it holds in contempt, but which undergirds its every capacity, its every strength, its every entitlement, it's every luxury, and it engages, as we saw with these ridiculous encampments, in the pseudo play acting of revolutionary fervor that is totally dependent on a larger infrastructure of public order and capitalism. It makes me sick that anybody ever takes any student protest seriously and pretend that these are people that are putting their lives at risk and heroic rebels sacrificing themselves. I went up to the Columbia University encampment the day that uh, it stormed administration building, and it was hilarious. You have these lovely north face tents, brightly colored, erected in a quad that is itself surrounded by the grand Beaux-Arts buildings that were built by the fathers, the public figures of New York City, protecting it from Broadway, protecting the encampment from Amsterdam Avenue. No, you can't get in, security all around. And yet they're playing it being, revolutionary and depriving themselves of their nice beds. Meanwhile, the faculty is bringing them protein bars and pizza and whatnot. It's all fake. It's all performative. Same with Mamdani. Everything he wants to do, he ran on 4 proposals. They're all ludicrous. I will mention just one right now. He wants to put a government-run supermarket in each of the 5 boroughs of New York in order to allegedly battle the food affordability crisis. We are so affordable with our food here that the biggest problem facing the poor, as we all know, and it's exactly the same in Britain, is obesity. Nevertheless, we're supposed to believe that by putting people ahead of profits and taking the profit out of grocery stores, it's gonna be a marvelous cornucopia of Edenic produce. Well, you know what? Everything provided in those stores is going to be provided by the great complex web of for-profit industry, entrepreneurialism, risk-taking, mastering supply chains. It's all fake. If he really wanted to show us what government enterprise in food supply could accomplish, here's what he should do: import only things that are produced in Cuba and North Korea. That would give us a little sense. As far as the other explanations for him, uh, I do not buy the efforts of the right wing to say, well, this is really a serious problem. Affordability, for 2 reasons. One, I don't buy the original diagnosis, and I certainly do not buy Mondami's prescriptions. But as far as affordability, I'm a little jaundiced, Brendan. I don't see a single young person walking around the streets of New York who isn't clutching a Starbucks Frappuccino at $7 to $10 a crack. I don't see young people actually daring to drink New York City's fabulous tap water that is brought down from aquifers north of the city. Instead, they all insist on bottled water, which is not just a uh, total unnecessity when it comes to health, but is a great contributor to plastic overload and carbon emissions. And yet, these young people, of course, believe themselves to be climate warriors. And as far as so I don't, I do not believe that absent extravagant spending habits and absent a willingness to defer gratification, that life is really that terrible for young people today. But as for Mondami's solutions, and the right, of course, wouldn't buy into these, but he's got it absolutely backwards. Mondami claims that government is the solution to the affordability crisis. It's the cause. Cities in the United States vary wildly in their cost of living. It's a very simple, linear correlation. The cities with the highest degree of regulation, of taxation, of burdens placed on business are the most expensive. It is there's no place in the country more expensive to build a 15-story apartment building than New York City because we regulate everything in sight. We tax everything in sight in order to raise this gargantuan city budget, $111 billion for New York City to fritter away on useless welfare programs that try to substitute personal responsibility. They say, "Oh, well, we'll just write a check or we'll give you some barely literate social worker because, parents aren't really important." So I don't buy that. I'm not going to sort of waste time on whether he's socialist or communist. It doesn't really matter. But surely he does possess not just hatred for for-profit entrepreneurs, but more importantly, utter ignorance about what they do.
It's the thing that really irritates me about the affordability question, and I have no doubt that young people find it hard to make ends meet or to get the things they need and so on. That's always been the case. People in their 20s and 30s have always struggled to find their feet and to create a home. It's never been easy for any generation. But there's this anti-boomer element to it as well. This idea, which I don't know where it comes from, that the boomers had it easy and that every single person born in that period had a fine life, which is simply not true. I mean, I often make the point in the British case that 7% of boomers went to university. A huge chunk of them left school at the age of 14 or 16 and went to work. The idea that this was a uniformly privileged generation and that the millennials have it uniquely hard is simply not substantiated by the facts of history at all. Um, but in relation to that, who supported Mamdani? Now, of course, he got 1 million votes. That's a lot of votes, and people will have voted for him for all sorts of reasons, including, I'm sure, because they just thought the knackered old establishment candidates were not very good. Um, but in terms of his most enthusiastic vote, he got a lot from those kind of very, hip parts of Brooklyn, I noticed, except, of course, part of Williamsburg, where there are lots of Jews. Very notably, that's one part of that trendy part of Brooklyn that did not vote for him. Who voted for him? Who's most enthusiastic about this new administration in New York, do you think?
Again, the Columbia College student body, when I went to the encampment, what struck me it just hit me over the head, what I was seeing in these robots that were marching for 3 hours around the quad, they were overwhelmingly female, and we saw that in practically every pro-jihadist protest on American college campuses and in Britain, except when you get the pure Islamists, then you've got more males there. But when it comes to a more sort of native population, it is females today who are on the fringes of uh, any kind of sensible politics, who are destroying long-standing institutions that depended on risk-taking, on free speech, on an openness towards the development of knowledge that didn't take refuge in these completely specious concepts of hate speech, of threat, of harm. And so the largest percentage that I've seen so far among the different groups, among voters under 30, he got 84% females under 30 voted for Mondami. The percentage under 30 generally is 78%. That's very high. So he really is pulling in the younger voters who have been I hate to use this phrase, but nothing else comes to me, failed by the education system. I don't wanna, uh, alleviate or take any responsibility off their shoulders because I think, they should take some responsibility for their education, but clearly, the K through 12 system in the United States, that is the pre-collegiate system, and college, um, have failed to convey the most basic rudiments of understanding of how precious, the institutions of Western civilization are, certainly failed to convey any understanding of basic economic truths. Now, I grew up as I guess I think I'm a young boomer, or late wave boomer. I was born in '56. I'm not ashamed to disclose. Um, and I certainly had no economic education, and I'm not really sure what that would look like. On the other hand, I was a good product of that. I grew up in of the West Coast, and I was a liberal by default. I did embrace all of those stupid slogans that now define the Mamdani, candidacy and will define his mayoralty, an innate belief that any kind of wealth inequality must be unjust or that capitalists are exploiting everybody else. So I wasn't taught anything about economic reality, and I certainly didn't know it. It took me decades to work out of that default, uh, liberal worldview that you get in the coastal communities in New York City and in sort of elite college towns in the inside. Otherwise, what we see, he got a lot of minorities. There'd been this rather poignant and pathetic hope after the Trump election that, "Oh, well, we've made some gains with Blacks and Hispanics, therefore we've broken the the dominance of the Democratic Party in non-white communities." That proved short-lived. He got 61% of Blacks, 57% of Hispanics, 47% of Asians. Demography continues to be destiny. He certainly got a lot of he got, I'm sure, almost all of the South Asian vote, and, at the very end, he started really, really demagoguing on the Islam identity and came out with, again, statements that are as fanciful as the Israel is committing genocide. He said that, well, being a Muslim in New York is a source of deep threat and danger, and it's the only group that you can incite violence against, and anybody will you won't get anybody, following up on that. That's just ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. Uh we've seen what you guys have seen, which is that it's Jews that are the victim group in terms of ethnic rivalries today. But Mandami, at the very end, went all in on his Muslim identity, which is fine, but he's playing the victim card with that and setting himself and setting Muslims up against this phantom uh, white establishment, which is just not the case.
Yeah, it's very, very similar in the UK where the radical left, Jews in this country are going through one of the worst upsurges in anti-Semitic violence and assaults since for a very long time. And
Right.
all that the radical left talks about is Islamophobia,
Yeah.
which of course can mean anything at all from, criticizing the Quran to genuine acts of bigotry. So they have a complete blind spot on where the real racism is taking place today.
And let me just add, what you see both there and in the Germany, which I follow German politics pretty closely. If they do talk about anti-Semitism, the implication is, well, the anti-Semitism comes from the right, from the Alternative for Deutschland, and therefore, we need to be ever vigilant and we need to ban the AfD. Whereas the anti-Semitism in Europe comes from the left. It comes from the Muslims that you guys insisted on bringing in because you're so determined to wipe out the core cultural and national identity of the West, whether it's in Britain or the rest of Europe or in the United States. So, you can say, well, we've had this little skirmish in the United States about Nick Fuentes and anti-Semitism on the right. I can tell you, Brandon, that is a trivial portion of what the massive source of anti-Semitism is in the United States, which is left-wing academic ideology of post-colonialism, anti-Western, anti-imperialism.
Another way in which Mamdani is like the radical left in the UK is that both hide behind the working classes to pursue policies that will not be of benefit to working class communities. And you mentioned this in your piece as well about Mamdani. You talk about how he poses as a great hero of the working class. He will deliver them from poverty and so on. And yet his own background tells a slightly different story. And of course, his policies tell a slightly different story as well. I mean, he is not a champion of New York's working class communities, is he?
No, and, I it's probably not so fair for me to criticize anybody's elite education because I had one as well, but nevertheless, I didn't I didn't go around at the time or then purporting to be a champion of the working class, but yes, he grew up his father, Ugandan, he was overshadowed by Edward Said at Columbia University, but the father is an absolutely garden variety post-colonial theorist that sees the West as the source of the world's problems, a view which is completely phony. I'm sure you've spoken with Nigel Bigger as just one of the great deconstructors of that myth about colonialism. Uh, but he checks off all the boxes, and Edward Said and Khalidi, another Columbia University anti-Western theorist, were frequent guests at the family dinner table. Uh, and his mother was a Indian filmmaker, does left-wing documentaries. Mandami, if he was such a working class champion, there's the greatest working class college in the country in New York City, City College of New York, that gave rise to a whole bunch of leading New York intellectuals, Irving Kristol being one of them. Uh, and and has a very storied academic tradition. When Mondami started college, the tuition at CCNY was about $6,000. Where did Mondami choose to go? Bowdoin College, which is in a bucolic, secluded rural area of Maine, and, as people say, well, it's mostly white, but of course it was rapidly diversifying then. And Bowdoin used to be a wonderful college. It gave rise to Nathaniel Hawthorne, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, presidents, Supreme Court justices, leading abolitionists, industrialists, inventors. Its tuition when Mondami went was $60,000, so 10 times that of CCNY. And I can guarantee you that if Mondami wanted economic diversity, he wasn't gonna get it at Bowdoin. And after that, it just was more of the same. He had the privilege to bounce around between these feckless, nonprofits. He reminds me of Obama. In Obama's, first autobiography, he writes about being so distraught because he knows he wants to be a community organizer, but he can't find a topic to organize around. He's in Chicago and, well, what do I do here? So he finally latches on to creating some kind of work counseling organization on the South Side, which of course went out of business immediately, did absolutely nothing. But Mandami's the same way. Well, I want to be a community organizer, but what do I do? I don't have any things to organize around. So he bounced between a PIRG, public interest research group organization, and a social justice housing advocacy South Asian organization in New York. Had no job experience, none, zero. Worked as a nepotistic benefit on his mother's film briefly, was briefly had an abortive career as a rapper in Uganda, and then ran for office. And from there, usual all-female staff, managed 4 people in his staff, and now he's gonna manage 300,000 New York City employees and, tens of thousands more private contractors. He shows no management experience, and he sees, again, New York as an ideological project. No, urban governance is a management challenge. I say putting Mamdani in front of a leviathan like the New York City government, which needs to be brought to heel. It needs constant attention to keep the bureaucracies functioning, to keep them actually performing, is like putting somebody who can't read a music score in front of an orchestra and expecting him to conduct Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. He does not have anything to make us believe in his background that he can pull this off.
Yeah, it's very well put. I really like that point about how he treats New York City as an ideological project rather than what it is, which is a huge, wonderful, symphonic, creaking city that has this vast bureaucracy that needs very clear management. So I think that's very well put. I want to ask you about a couple more of his policies. You've touched on some of them already, but there was lots of talk about free bus rides in New York City and free childcare. Um, Now, the thing that scares me about a proposal like free childcare from someone like Mamdani is that you just know it would be, I mean, even if it was feasible, you know it would be, again, an ideological project. This would be a species of social engineering. We saw something similar under the new Labour government here in the UK when they rolled out more and more childcare, and it really became a way to inculcate children with certain values from a very, very early age. And I'm sure Mamdani would do something similar. But how feasible are these kinds of proposals? Are they just pie in the sky? Is there any possibility at all that he will see some of those things through? What is this obsession that he has with saying, have this, have that, everything for free?
Well, I mean, that appeals to people, and it gives him the patina of being a socialist. But his four proposals, as you say, free buses, free childcare, squeezing a third of the city's housing stock, and a government-run grocery store. They're weirdly specific. They don't. If there's an affordability crisis, it's sweeping, and people that are not riding buses, it doesn't help, and if you're not in a already rent stabilized building, freezing those rents doesn't help you either. But promising free stuff just appeals to that revolutionary fervor of people before profits, and we're going to take all the profits out of the system. Brendan, you raise a point I had not thought about before, which is the ideological power of the free childcare. That's a brilliant observation. I had thought about it more in terms of the manpower that would run these things because New York already has vast stretches in the outer boroughs with practically no for-profit businesses left because the crime is high and we're not enforcing the law and the taxes are so high. So you just have the nonprofits, government-funded nonprofits, uh, storefront after storefront, foster care services, kinship foster care, juvenile delinquency counseling. I've visited a lot of these, and the people that work there are one baby step ahead of their clients in terms of social functioning. They're barely literate. And so my concern is where is he gonna find the capacity uh, for this many new social workers? But you're absolutely right, both in content and in intention, part of this is part of and I hate to use anything that smacks of conspiracy theories because I think things are incremental. I don't think there's ever an overall blueprint or plan. Nevertheless, one can observe that the um, direction of the left is to push out the family from everything and to have government take over as much as possible. And so that's part of this is that you don't need parents. You certainly don't need two parents. Uh, we're going to have government do this for you and he's got this amazing quote about, uh, "There's nothing that is too we will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve, and no concern too small for it to care about." That's terrifying. That is to me, that's pure Big Brother. Number 1, there are lots of problems that government can't solve, like most of them, but the idea that there's no concern too small for it to care about, pure license to get into your lives. Um, so the healthcare thing and as far as free buses, that's just a joke. Already and it's gonna cost another billion or so, and there's 2 ways of looking at the feasibility question. I'm gonna address first kind of the ideological one, and then answer your question a second way, Brandon, which is just sheer, does he have the power to do it? But free buses, already half of all bus rides are stolen. People get on, they do not pay the fare. Uh, the city, it costs $2.90 to use public transit in New York City. That's either a subway ride or a bus. It's already heavily subsidized. The taxpayers are way, way putting money into this to try and keep the prices down. There is a program in New York that offers half price fare to low income people. Only 40% of eligible New Yorkers have signed up. That to me does not signal a population that is so straitened that it can't afford the bus fares. But the real problem with this free bus fare concept is that it's going to set the principle that you can not only get away with stealing your ride, but we're not even going to ask you to pay at this point. That principle is going to immediately uh, migrate into the underground, into the subway system, into the tube, an already horrifying, crime producing, turnstile jumping, fare beating problem is going to get much worse because people are going to completely stop paying subway fares, and that's really bad. Whether he has the legislative capacity to do this, um, not necessarily, and that's why, again, a lot of this is performative. Fiddling around with the subway fares does require state involvement. And the childcare, he could probably, that's probably the most within his capacity, but the funding for that is very problematic. And for that, he has a huge set of tax increases, which he has in mind. One of them is to raise the corporate tax. Mandami said any money that you leave in the private sector, whether because you're not collecting taxes, or you just haven't raised money, he says that's money wasted. So I mean, the guy's just perfect. He really views the private sector as just a waste, that everything is done by government. So he wants to raise taxes on corporations. He's never seen a higher tax that he doesn't just envy. It doesn't fill him with longing and desire. So it turns out New Jersey has a higher corporate tax rate than New York. So he wants to match New Jersey. Never mind that New Jersey's economy is also more abundant. It's losing residents to low tax red states. But what raising the corporate tax to fund his pet socialist projects means, that's a state tax. So you're asking corporations based in Buffalo, in upstate New York, a very troubled city, to pay a higher tax rate to fund Mondami's utopian projects. That's a hard sell. He also wants to raise the personal income tax rate. It's the usual, again, the Columbia undergraduate slogans. The rich don't pay their fair share. 37,000 households in New York City pay almost 50% of all taxes in New York City. That's out of 3 million households. Mandami has never said what the rich's fair share is, but he's certainly moving towards like a total expropriation, one assumes, because his view is the purpose of any private enterprise is just to be transferred into government projects, and people will leave. This assumption that people are just going to stay around and see more and more of their hard-earned income be transferred into programs that don't work. If it was a question of funding infrastructure projects, we have, on October 1, Mondami wants to double the number of public housing projects in New York. October 1, we got a little warning. You can't say New Yorkers weren't forewarned. A 20-story ventilator shaft on the outside of a public housing project in the Bronx just sheared off completely. An avalanche of bricks and mortar. Fortunately, nobody was underneath and hurt. But the infrastructure in New York is crumbling. The subways regularly flood. People have to walk through dark tunnels to get out. If it was a question of raising taxes to say, we're going to increase the police force, we're going to have police officers to prevent people from being pushed into the subways, we're going to increase make the roads functional, people would be willing to do that, but that's not what he's doing. He's not talked about that. He wants to have these useless redistributive social worker programs that depend on disregarding family structure and believing that what keeps poor people down is racism and sexism rather than the disintegration of the family.
The way you describe his view of the role of the government, I mean, that really is terrifying. Every large problem, every small problem, every facet of life, he's essentially saying will become in some way the purview of the government. It's a chilling prospect. Um, I want to ask you about globalize the intifada and that side of the discussion. You've touched on it already. That was a big part of the moral malaise at places like Columbia and Yale and other places which were overrun with an Israelophobia that very often crossed the line into outright anti-Semitism. How important is it that Mamdani has refused to condemn a slogan like globalize the intifada? I know Jewish New Yorkers find it horrifying that he wouldn't condemn that. They find his views more broadly horrifying in relation to Israel and the Jewish issue itself. How concerned should Jews in New York be about Mamdani's rise to power?
Very concerned. I've heard from those same conservative right-wingers that you previously quoted, Brendan, about, well, really, there's a real affordability crisis, and he's addressing that, and Republicans have to pay attention. Uh, it's also said, well, the mayoralty of New York doesn't have foreign policy powers. That's not really, he doesn't have much capacity to do anything about that. I think that's naive. We can't foresee what sort of tone he's going to set in the city. Famously, he's vowed to arrest Netanyahu if he comes to New York City. I wouldn't put it past him to try. We'll see who the police commissioner is at that point. But I think the tone that's set is if we have more outbreaks of the fanatical anti-Israel protests, that could affect how they're policed. And it also is just a broader question, and this gets beyond Jews in particular, but it's another reminder that he is ignorant about the West and about the fragility of order, the fragility of constitutional government, the unbelievable conquest of ignorance that was the scientific revolution that began in London in the 17th century with the Royal Society. Israel is the Western Enlightenment country par excellence, despite its religious, particularism. Nevertheless, as far as its embrace of science, it also has its socialist tendencies, but it's also been very entrepreneurial when it comes to the tech sector. Um, so it's all of a piece, and I think he will embolden the very left-wing anti-Israel haters in New York, and we don't know. So, we're living in a time where there's a new catastrophe every day. We don't know what's gonna happen in the Middle East. Maybe things will stay relatively quiet. That would be without precedent in history. I was not celebrating the peace deal necessarily because I just thought it's not gonna last. I'm a skeptic, I'm a pessimist, and, I still don't think it necessarily will, so I would be worried. We just he's been very clear, as he's said the Palestinian cause has been the constant in my intellectual firmament. That's the thing he is most committed to, so I don't think that's gonna be something that is now put behind him.
Yeah, it's so clear to me and to others as well that the clash over Israel is fundamentally a clash over civilizational values themselves. And I know it's become a bit controversial to say that, but it's clearly true. Are you on the side of the West or are you on the side of the West's enemies? Are you on the side of the Jewish nation or are you on the side of the armies of anti-Semites that want to destroy it? I mean, these are the choices we're faced with, and seems to me that Mamdani and that culture he represents have absolutely chosen the wrong side in that battle. There's no question about that. Um, I want to ask you about the Democrats more broadly, and there's been lots of discussion about what this means for the Democrats. There's the Andrew Cuomo problem, and a lot of people are saying that one reason Mamdani won the primaries and then eventually won the mayoralty is because Cuomo was just not a good candidate. The Democrats were being lazy. They were falling back on an establishment figure, even though he was a fairly discredited person. And now the Democrats are thinking, where do we go next? Do we go down the Mamdani road, or do we try and recover working class votes by being more normal? I mean, they've brought this problem on themselves to a certain extent, haven't they? What can they do next in the post Mamdani era, do you think?
Well, they could say, no, we're going to be centrist. We are not going to be the Columbia undergraduate student body. We're going to understand that capitalism is the thing that brought us our prosperity, that risk taking, the capacity to dream big, to create new things, those are not the function, those are not the properties of government, those are the properties of individuals that uh, have aspirations and ambition, and we should celebrate competition. We should celebrate industry building. The robber barons, they created this city. We live with their monuments: Carnegie Hall, Rockefeller Center, the Frick Museum, the Morgan Library. In no way should we look down on this. So they could say, uh, we want to make sure that American government is creating the conditions for for-profit activity, and again, that means basically maintaining law and order, maintaining infrastructure, roads, communication systems, uh, and we heard so much demagoguing from both the right and the left during the recent government shutdown with regards to food stamps. It's totally shocking that 1 in 8 Americans is on food stamps, and we're supposed to believe that without them, there'll be widespread starvation. That's simply not the case. There's no the eligibility requirements for food stamps is very low. It goes very high up the income ladder. You don't have to work. You don't have to do anything to get food stamps. And why not pick them up? But that again, government. That's not what government is about. That's a very recent development in the history of government, starting from the England. It was about foreign relations, maintaining possibilities of commerce within a country. It wasn't a redistribution project, and that's all it's viewed. But I think, again, I'm speaking as a pessimist. Uh, I think that the Democrats will go with the allure of the younger identity politics infused wave and will move further to the left. I think that's where the energy against Trump is. I think that a lot of the so-called more mainstream Democrats, like Gavin Newsom in California, not there maybe people would say don't ever he doesn't deserve any kind of mainstream Democratic title, but they're all using similarly histrionic language. So I think that that's where the demographic strength is moving, and that's where the energy is, and it's gonna be very hard, and the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic stuff is part of this as well, where you've seen a divide between the old school Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who are unapologetic in their support of Israel, and a new crop of young Democrats who view Israel as a perpetrator of genocide, which is again completely ignorant, but that's view, and I think that will be the dominant character of the Democratic Party.
What do you think that would mean for the Democratic Party's electoral fortunes? Because there's been a lot of discussion over the past few years in the US and across Europe as well, in fact, about how the old parties of Labour or the old social democratic parties, the Democrats, the Labour Party in the UK, the Christian Democrats parties in Europe, um, they've lost their working class voters to a large extent. The working class electorate is looking to either traditionally conservative parties or even populist parties, parties that they think will represent their economic and cultural concerns in more effectively. Do you think there's a possibility the Democrats will just say, right, we give up on the working classes, although the working classes have already given up on them, so the joke's on them, um, and tries to create this new coalition, which I guess would be the Columbia undergrad types, plus certain minority groups, that kind of pork barrel politics of identity. Is that where the future of the Democratic Party lies, do you think?
It's that is the fault line in the big battle, um, and I would say, just to double down on what you said, the working classes are right. Let's not be agnostic about this. They're absolutely right to migrate to conservative parties that understand the need for national identity, for borders, for a coherent belief in what a nation is, and do not believe the falsehood that diversity is our strength. Actually, community and identity is our strength. Um, to argue against myself, one can look at there's a character in Pennsylvania, Senator John Fetterman, who gets a lot of attention because he is more independent than most and has been a very strong voice um, for Israel and has been willing to be moderate and feels like we've got to stop the identity politics and appeal to working class voters. He's been at various times mocked by conservatives and then embraced by conservatives because he's had mental, psychological problems just through brain problems. But again, now he's beloved of conservatives because he is standing up to the left wing. So you could say, well, there is that. There are those people like that. I don't know what the numbers are. California is basically run now. It's the biggest state. It's the most rich state. It's bleeding the working class. It's bleeding the middle class like crazy, but it's still got the tech sector there, and it's got a lot of poor illegal aliens. It's got, more illegal aliens than any other state. It has sanctuary policies, that is, laws that ban any cooperation between local police and immigration enforcement. So, you have like the poor immigration officers that say to a local jail or prison, "Please, could you let us know when you're about to release this illegal alien felon so we can take him off your hands and deport him so you won't have to worry about that's one less illegal alien gangbanger that you have to worry about in trying to protect your own residents and citizens." And the California response to that is invariably, "No, we're gonna sneak him out of the jail in the dark of night so he gets to go back into the community because we don't have enough illegal aliens. We gotta hold on to the illegal alien criminals as well." It's truly amazing. So California is split between the wealthy elites and the minority, now becoming a majority demographically, but the non-white immigrant population. And that is the politics that it embraces, and that could well be the model for the rest of the country going out. I really don't have, a strong sense of necessarily which way this would go, but it's quite possible that it will choose that bipolar model and just say, "To hell with the deplorables, let them go, good riddance."
Yeah, yeah. I think that's absolutely right. Um, okay, Heather, my last question for you. I think you kind of already said no to this already throughout this whole conversation, but I wanted to ask you about, is woke dead? Now, it's a strange question to ask at the end because we've just talked about the Mamdani phenomenon, the coming to power of that kind of campus culture, essentially, the possibility that the Democrats will double down on identitarianism in the absence of anything else of substance that they might have going for them. So I guess the answer is no, but you will know that there's a lot of discussion now about the waning of wokeness, especially following the coming to power of Trump for a second time. Some of his brilliant executive orders that he wrote, especially on the trans question and on green issues and the issue of American history. I thought the thing he wrote on the executive order on defending American history from those who defame America's past, which is an issue you've been writing about for a long time. I thought that was one of the best executive orders I've ever read. I mean, it was an extraordinary piece of writing, a great passionate defense of the wonder of American democracy. So it's an open-ended question, I guess, because there are some positive things happening in relation to the scourge of wokeness, and there are some negative things too. What's your general take on this culture of wokeness, or whatever we're supposed to call it, and what its fortunes might be in the next few years?
I flipped recently. I was allowing myself some unwanted, that's with an O, optimism, because I thought it just felt like I'm so sick of the race grift. I'm so sick of the race hustle, and I may have been projecting my own sense that this is over. We've done this for decades now. Nobody's going to put up with it any longer. And the scenario I had was Trump is somebody who's got the biggest bully pulpit in the world, and he is patently oblivious to being called a racist. He doesn't give a damn. You can call him a racist all you want. He's going to keep on doing what he wants to do. And you've probably experienced this, I've probably experienced it, simply saying the truth, being a one voice that's willing to stand up and say, "No, actually, the emperor has no clothes. Everything have been told to believe in this institution, you can think otherwise." That matters. People want to have a role model. They want to have somebody break the logjam. And once that logjam is broken, it it may in fact give other people courage to say, sorry, we're not going to accept this idea that whiteness is a curse, that whiteness is a infection on other people, that it is the source of, again, the world's evils. In fact, Western civilization has been the source of the world's prosperity. The only reason that the life expectancies are expanding in the third world is because of the first world, giving them vaccines, medicines, infrastructure, uh, green revolution plants. None of that is based on third world technology. It's all first world. So, I could kind of imagine um, people saying, it's done, it's over. I completely share your admiration, Brendan, for the executive orders. They're stunning in their multiplicity, in the creative things that they're doing. They know every last code, federal regulation in the code of federal regulations. Somebody behind the scenes is just an architect of sanity and wisdom, but they are executive orders, which means they have no permanent force of law. And just as Trump tore up Joe Biden's day one executive order that made racial equity the lodestar of every federal agency. 80 agencies had to come up with racial equity plans to enforce disparate impact and lower standards and race norm ideas of excellence and accomplishment. The next Democratic president will do the same with Trump's executive orders. And I also uh, I think that universities are doubling down. They have won some PR battles recently with a almost uniform rejection of Trump's offer of voluntary agreements to get funding back. Uh, and they are not going away. The faculty's not going away. The diversity bureaucracies are simply rebranding themselves with, instead of inclusion, you have belonging. That was going on even before Trump. So the only thing that is really the most powerful tool that Trump has with regards to the universities is if he can absolutely require that every one of them, and he's subsequently limited it to very large elite institutions, publish their admissions data. That's all we need.
Yeah.
As long as we can get our hands on the admissions data, what is the average SAT scores? These are the standardized tests that we give college seniors to have an objective measure of what their skills are independently of grade inflation. As long as we know the average SAT scores of different racial groups and can calculate the odds, we will know whether those schools are compliant with the rules against racial preferences or if they are uh, ducking them. And if we can get back to merit in the sciences in universities, that will matter in the long term. Nevertheless, I think that these institutions will have the capacity to wait us out. And so I don't think the battle over merit is over. I think it's the idea that excellence and merit are just codes for white supremacy, which is, of course, preposterous. The people that are running our sciences now are Asians. The people with the highest income in the United States are various Asian groups. I will believe in white privilege when I hear about a Black high school senior wondering if he can get away with putting his race down as white on his college application form. In fact, it's the opposite. Every white male wants to be Black to get in. The reality is Black privilege. So I think that it's gonna be with us for a while, and we continually need to argue that we should not lower our standards for the sake of racial proportionality. The solution to disparate outcomes, different performance levels, is not to tear down standards. It's to meet the damn standards by hard work, self-discipline, and deferred gratification.
Heather, thank you very much. Thanks again to PIA VPN for sponsoring this episode. Take control of your digital life and get PIA for 86% off. Click the link in the description below or scan the QR code.